Hello everyone. Today I have a card to share with you. I copied this card from fellow demonstrator Melissa Kerman, and her blog is Melissa's Crafting Treehouse, and I will link to her blog post about this card in the comments of this or description of this video. I added this part. She didn't have an envelope in there, but I love to do embossing on the envelope flap if there's embossing on the card. I think it's, I just love doing something to the envelope, and stamping is fun, but embossing is, something different and cool as well. So I made this a sympathy card because it just, oops, am I on? There we go. It just, to me, it was very subdued and elegant and just seemed like it would make a really good sympathy card. Now, my sample today will not have the strip of the black shimmer ribbon. I ran out of it. I made several of these cards for my team meeting last month, and I used up this shimmer ribbon. You can still order it. It's in the big catalog, page 200. The picture shows the powder pink, but you can still get the basic black and Pear Pizzazz and Pool Party through June 3rd. And then that one will retire, but you will still be able to get a 1/2-inch black satin ribbon. And you'll also be able to get this 3/8 inch glittered organdy ribbon. Will be in the new catalog on June 4th as well. That is not a new product, that's a carryover from the Occasions catalog. Okay, so the most important part of this card is this technique piece here. And I don't know if it has a specific name, but what we did was take our Country Floral embossing folder, and this will also be carrying over from the Occasions catalog into the new annual catalog on June 4th. And we're going to open it up. And you want to take your Versamark and apply it to the top half with the Stampin' Up! Logo. That's the top. This is going to put the ink on the parts that will be flat, maybe you could call it, on your card, and it will not go into the depressions in this folder. That is what the underneath part will push the paper up into the depressions, and that makes the texture of the paper. So we are not going to press too hard because we don't want to get ink into those depressions. We don't want ink on as much on the images. We want it to be on what is not raised up, the lower flat part of the paper. Actually, of the copper foil, because we're using copper foil. So let me just make sure I got this well inked. And then I like to center it, or I should say line it up with an edge, just so I know it's not crazy. This maybe wouldn't matter too much, but I really like it to make sure that it looks orderly and not wonky at all. So I'm going to start down here. There's kind of a line, like a 1/4 inch in from the edge where you can see the design starts, and then we're going to fold it over. And then, I don't think it really matters which way the thing goes, but I like to have the top up just so I can see. And then I'm going to pause the video while I go over to my embossing folder and run this through. Okay, so you can see this beautiful embossed design that shows up. It looks so cool on foil papers. I recommend that you give it a try. And then I know people have their own ways for doing embossing powder. I just stick with a scratch piece of paper, and we're going to use black embossing powder, and it uses up a little bit, but there's a lot in this jar, so you should have a lot left in here. Sprinkle it, and you don't have to worry about wasting or anything because you're just going to tap it back into the jar. So I just find it's a lot easier for me to just sprinkle it on and not try to be scraping and using just a little bit, because you just pour what you don't use back in. And I just want to really make sure I get as much on as I can. I do find that the edges just don't pick up the embossing or the Versamark as well, but this is an imperfect look, so it's okay And that looks pretty neat. If it's not evenly inked all over or powdered all over. You can see I have a little bit less powder up there at the top, a little bit more here, but it all looks, it's very pretty. Okay, so then we'll put this over here and tap this back in. It might be off camera. And then there's another bit of embossing to do on this little scratch piece. Oh, I had it all laid out here nicely with the, what are these called? Measurements, but I'll just read it to you. So this is a scratch piece that we're using with the pretty label punch. But then we will have this piece I already ran through the subtle embossing folder. I had prepped them for my team so things could go quicker. And this is 5 1/4 by 4. And then the piece of Very Vanilla for the inside is also 5 1/4 by 4 inches. I'm going to stamp a sentiment in Memento Black ink on here before we adhere it inside. And then this piece that we did our embossing on is 4 3/4 by 3 inches. And I will hopefully do a blog post about this and have these measurements on my blog and then have the video in there, link to the video as well. Okay, so I'm going to pause. Actually, I'm going to do the other embossing and then pause the video and emboss those at the same time. So I'm going to bring back my Versamark, and then this is with Deepest Sympathy, comes from Painted Glass, and that is a current stamp set in our annual catalog and we'll be carrying over into the new one. And it doesn't matter about centering it because you're just going to punch it out. Emboss first and then punch, and then we're actually also going to run this through our subtle embossing folder. When I had it on the card at first, it just seemed to stick out because this has texture and embossing, and then the black large layer had the you know, the dry embossing with the folder on it, and this just seems so flat and plain. So I ran it through. I'm not sure, this is a very subtle texture, but there's these nice little lines that just give it kind of like a linen paper look sort of thing, and just really adds a little extra something. So I'm going to sprinkle some powder on here before the ink dries. You don't have to worry too much about the ink, except this time we're using gold. I'll make that copper since we use copper embossing. There's just a little bit left in this jar. I mean, we use copper foil paper, so we're going to use copper embossing paper powder. Struggling with my words today. That looks very nice. All right, so I'm going to pause this and emboss. Okay, so that turned out really nicely, I think. Some nice dark black areas and not too much powder on the raised images. I hope this is looking as pretty on the camera as it looks in person. But you can probably tell they're not quite the same. Every time will come out a little differently depending on how much ink you put down and where the powder covers. So that's going to be, you know, a really unique card. And then we will grab the pretty label punch. I always write on here with permanent marker because there's so many of the label punches, it's hard to keep them straight. I figure if I ever give this away or sell it, they'll find that handy too. I'm going to center that. That's pretty good. Away with our embossing powders. I've misplaced my lid. I'll find it. Okay, I think we can do some assembling. Now, if we had our ribbon, I would say to make sure to wrap around your ribbon on this piece before you adhered it down to your card base. Oh, and the card base is this traditional size, the 8 1/2 by 5 1/2, and then scored at 4 1/4 on the long side. So what I'm going to do first, I always do all the short layers first and then put the big layer down. And I am going to bring out some of our old snail. Oh, maybe not. It's kind of tied up. That's why they discontinued it. So I'm just going to use our regular Tombow. It's pretty strong. our regular snail, I should say. And then normally I wouldn't do as many in the middle, but because this got really warped with the heat tool, I'm gonna put a couple layers in the middle because we want this to stay flat. Move this and line it up. I love our grid paper. Lining up with a grid line helps you get your paper as straight as possible. And I want my darker part to be up here because then maybe some of the not as dark parts will be hidden by my punch. And I am still gonna put it up higher as if there was a ribbon underneath because I think that will still look nice with the foil paper up higher. And then, oh well, it's not quite perfect, but it's pretty good. And then the punch balancing it out down low. And I'm gonna flip it over so I can rub without worrying about rubbing off any powder. Should all be melted, but I wanna take a chance. Okay, that's pretty well on there. And then I'm gonna grab this and I think I'm gonna try popping this up with dimensionals. I think that might look really neat. I didn't do it on this card, but I'm gonna give it a shot. This is a border actually from one of the dimensional sheets. The mini ones have these very wide borders. So I'm going to use those in my corners. A nice little edge piece down there. There they are. I knew I had some of these out. And then just some on the middles. And I'll pause this so you don't have to watch me take them all off. Grab some of the bottom along with this one. And then one in the middle will probably be good. All right, I'll be back. Okay, so they're all on there. I'm gonna flip it over, line up my card again with a border or a line in the grid paper, and I'm gonna raise it up so you can see a little bit better. Okay, there we go. And then look for my middle line, and I think that's good. Find my pieces to press those down well. Oh, I think I like that. Can you tell? Can you see? I know it's all very black on black, but it just a little bit of a separation between the black layers. Okay, and then we've got our punch here. That also needs dimension on it. And we're gonna go into some of the border for this again. Oopsies. I'll do 4, one in each of the little rounded edges, bubbles. A little too long there. There we go. This won't take too long. I won't bother to pause it for this. Okay, and line it up again. And now I kind of liked having the end of this piece be centered between the foil and the edge of my black layer. I really think this through. And then kind of the same border between the edge of the black paper and the bottom of the die. And then that kind of puts the foil paper cutting right through the middle of the word sympathy. And it just, I don't know, it anchors it when you think things like that and what borders will be and how things will catch your eye. So then that's the front of the card, and then we'll flip it over and stamp a sentiment on the inside of the Very Vanilla. I did Very Vanilla, which I usually never think to do, instead of Whisper White, because with it all being so black and subdued, I wanted to stay with that kind of look and not do too much of a contrast, so I did Very Vanilla, so as little contrast as possible. Okay, so then this is from the Flourishing Phrases stamp set, and we're going to use the 2 of 2 that just has the words, and so we're using the praying that your heart will be lifted by the many loving thoughts that surround you today will be the sentiment for this one. And this is the set that's carrying over. I have it in the clear mount. They have stickers, but they don't stick well to the clear block, so I never put them on. But when this carries over, I think that it will be in our new cling, which is the exact same as the clear mount, except the stickers are really sticky and they don't fall off your block. So that will be really nice. If you don't have this one yet, I have used it a ton. It has so many sentiments inside and then matching outside ones and some really great big flower images. It's just a very handy basic set to have. Go-to sort of set. All right, so then I always practice, especially with sentiments and black. You want to make sure you get a good covering of ink, especially if you're freehanding it like this and not using your stamparatus where you can restamp very nicely. Pretty good. Slight crookedness, but no one else will look as closely as I do. Actually, I don't know. It's hard to tell with the scripty P. This might be straight. Alright, and no dimensionals on this, just straight on the inside. It is a little harder lining up your cards with such a dark base. It's hard to see where the crease is, but if you look closely, you can still see it. I always never have my bone folder handy, and I always end up just using my finger, which is one card. Your fingers don't get too sore. But that bone folder is handy. So there you have it. I really don't know how to succinctly say this technique, but the Versamark and embossing folder with black powder over top of it technique, and the subtle embossing folder. Oh, that's what we forgot. Never put the punch through the embossing folder, but minor detail. And raise that up, and then your sentiment on the inside, and still looks really cool. This adds just a little more of an elegant regal feel to it with the ribbon, but still, if you don't have the ribbon and you just want to go for it, still very, very beautiful card. So thanks to Melissa for the inspiration.